No matter how cookie cutter many politicians might seem these days, no matter how generic, how you've seen one, you've seen them all, they might seem. The problem with lumping all of them together like that is that no one actually votes for a generic candidate. You vote for a real person. You vote for an actual candidate. So when a polling organization like Gallup asks in its weekly tracking poll whether voters prefer a generic Democratic candidate for Congress or a generic Republican candidate in this year's elections, and we report, as we did last week, that they prefer the generic Republican by 10 points, a big, big margin. Look, it's right there. That is interesting. That is the kind of thing that drives incessant political chatter. But its usefulness as a predictor of what will actually happen in the elections is quite easily overstated, as demonstrated by the fact that just 1 week after that Gallup poll, that survey that last week showed a 10-point gap now shows the generic candidates suddenly tied. Within days, the Republicans' perceived lead magically evaporated. Or not. Maybe it had something to do with the completely hypothetical question. Maybe last week's numbers were a statistical anomaly. Or maybe it's that registered voters were surveyed instead of likely voters, the people more likely to show up and vote. Here's another poll from Gallup that takes a more useful snapshot of American politics right now. This graph measures enthusiasm about voting. Why is that important? Because the people who say they are excited about voting are people who, again, are probably more likely to go to the trouble of actually voting on Election Day. In the past week, there's really been no change in this one, no change in the advantage that Republicans hold over Democrats when it comes to how excited, how likely to actually show up on Election Day their members really are. There's a whopping 25-point gap in stated voter enthusiasm. Enthusiasm that has also been measured another way, without all of the hypotheticals and the speculation. Researchers at American University counted the number of people who voted in the primaries that have been held so far this year. They found that 4 million more Republicans have turned out than Democrats. 4 million more. They counted. Understanding what's going to happen in the elections and why means discerning among all the data out there which numbers are most predictive of what's going to happen on Election Day. A poll that tells you how a fictional does not exist Republican might do against a fictional does not exist Democrat is probably not all that predictive. A survey that tries to measure how voters might feel 8 weeks from now, that is only slightly less hypothetical. But the actual observed number of people who have voted this year, the number of Republicans compared with the actual observed number of Democrats who have voted this year, that's actually a real number. A 4 million vote turnout deficit in the primaries is a very bad news metric for Democrats. But it's also a good number in the sense that it is a solid, measurable, not hypothetical, not chatter-based bad news metric. It's real. They count it. Now, Democrats, if you have succeeded in ignoring the pointless metrics and paying attention to the real ones, the question is, how are you going to turn that real and really worrying for Democrats number around? What's your plan for turning out your base, for example?